just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Welcome back to the channel, Grand Columbia, and welcome to Coffee Time Live. Got different software today because I've got a guest. I haven't used it in a while. Might be a little discombobulated. Volumes might be a little off. I'm sure that you guys will tell me. So, let's see. Got Rob. Hello, Rob. How you doing? Juka. Nothing will come up on the screen the way it normally does, but Juka sent in a contribution this morning, as he does every week. Mike, video, audio clear. Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate that, Mike. You're usually the first on the draw with that. I appreciate it. John, Cerritos, kind of hot today. It's been pretty awesome here. We've been coasting in the low to mid 70s mostly. Tommy, good for me on sound and video. Awesome. Mike Jarvis, how you doing? Went out, he introduced me to a restaurant I hadn't been to before in Pueblo Tapao. It was very nice. It's always nice to see you, Mike. I hope you put good use to those species. William, how you doing, William? I'm getting all kinds of secondhand information. I heard you sold your car and you bought a big SUV with bulletproof glass. we got to hook up, have lunch or something. Don, hello from Colorado. How you doing? Renee, hi from Belgium, the world capital. Stream Elements, I didn't think that'd be working. So I don't know. Well, it'll tell me if somebody does a contribution. And I should mention the other one, Mr. Anonymous, Jerry. He also sent in one before we got started. Judy, how you doing, Judy? You've been here every week for a while now. I appreciate it. Don, life is good in Ibagué. Make sure you say Ibagué. Okay. So I got some news things, but I got my guest waiting here, so I think we're going to get right to it. This is Dennis. He's been watching the channel for quite a while. I'll let him fill you in on everything. I'll let him pretty much talk, but he's in Paraguay now, and I'm curious because I've been reading recently about some changes going on there, and so I jumped at the chance to ask him, and fortunately he agreed to come on. Maybe it's mostly for me, but maybe you guys will find it interesting. Mark, hi, good morning. Mark from Iowa, counting down to be in Colombia. You got to learn to spell it right. April 25th, in Armenia a few days after. Hope I can meet up. Absolutely. All right. And here is Dennis. Boom.
Hi, everybody.
Let's change that up. There.
Better.
So what was your path to get to Paraguay?
I was originally thinking about going to Colombia, and in fact had somewhat from reading settled on Armenia anyway. My best friend is living in Paraguay, married to Colombia, married to a engineer in north of you there just a bit. And I liked Armenia better, but maybe 18 months ago, I started reading some of the income tax laws of Paraguay. And between my Social Security and the military retirement that I get, I would have just been over the level where they would have wanted to tax me. And being the uber paranoid person I am, I did not want to do the thing where I did my Social Security in one bank account and not report the military retirement. It just isn't my nature. And so I started looking around for other countries that actually had territorial taxation. And Ecuador kind of fit the bill, but isn't quite as stable. And Uruguay is nice, but a little expensive, and does also tax. So I picked.
And it gets pretty cold there.
Uruguay, not too bad. They're just west of us, so it's they get warming from the ocean, or I don't know if they would get warming from the ocean or cooling from the ocean. But
what am I thinking of? Down by Argentina.
Yeah, north of Argentina.
Yeah, they get snow in the winter. It gets pretty cold there.
Chilly.
Yeah, they got
chilly.
4 seasons with lots of snow.
In Uruguay? No.
Yeah.
They're too low.
Yeah.
In altitude, is my understanding. I've never heard of snow in Uruguay.
Oh,
Paraguay actually did get snow once.
Not Paraguay, right? Uruguay.
Uruguay's just west of us. It's not that far away.
Okay.
Anyway, but it was a higher cost of living, so I wasn't interested anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I came for the taxes. Got here and absolutely fell in love with the Paraguayan people. Most friendly people you could ever meet. And Colombians are friendly. Everybody in South America, for the most part, is very friendly. But there's just something about Paraguay that, you end up loving the people. And so I'm here working on getting my residency permit.
Now, it's a little warm there, right?
Well, it depends. Paraguay has 2 seasons, summer and the rainy season. So summer's 4 months long, and the rest of the year is a rainy season.
Are you seeing changes to the economy there? I know you haven't been there that long, but are you seeing people talk about it? Or are you seeing anything actually coming through yet?
No. In particular, in relation to the dollar, the price seems very, very stable. And so I'm not seeing any banking rumors or concerns about banking failure other than what you would normally see.
Oh, not failure. It's they are poised to a lot of investments gone in there. They've tapped some massive natural gas and oil that just recently was unknown, and they've set up some program to kind of like put all this windfall into escrow that will go off to education and roads and infrastructure, so that depending on who's in power at the time, they won't be able to rob it. It'll kind of lock it in. But all those things are in process. So I'm curious as to whether they actually do that. But when that happens, prices will start going up because, as there's more money coming into the economy, it's going to have an effect. But it's as poor as it's been historically. I think it's a good thing that there's going to be money coming in for the infrastructure. There's a lot of country there that you can't even get to.
If you go back very far, Paraguay has a history, like a lot of South American countries, of instability, dictatorships, and all of the other problems, and lots of bank failures, things like that, corrupt banks. The last 25 years, Paraguay has been on a trajectory of stability. And every year that goes by, they seem more stable. Everybody's more comfortable. They're welcoming a lot of investments. Paraguay has a long history of welcoming outsiders anyway, which we could go into if people are interested in. But everything seems very stable, even though it's not as modern as perhaps Colombia. Well, as Colombia is. We're still a little lagging behind Colombia, both in terms of political stability and banking infrastructure, road infrastructure. But it's an upcoming country, and I have a lot of optimism for it.
Well, tell me some of the things that people will really be curious about, like housing. Do you have, like a lot of these countries, mini skyscrapers with gringo-style apartments, or how are the restaurants? What's the food like? Fill us in.
Paraguay's a little bit unique in some regards. Most of the construction is not the modern style construction. It's more what you would be accustomed to, brick and cement or mortar construction. There are a couple of high rises in Asuncion that are 20, maybe 30 stories tall, of a more conventional steel construction. But it's amazing that you can, with proper engineering, build a 10, 12 story building out of brick and mortar. And they manage it. I'm very comfortable in the building I'm in. Cost of housing is very attractive, especially if you go outside of Asuncion. Asuncion is probably the most expensive city in Paraguay. Well, it is the most expensive city in Paraguay. I had a studio apartment in Asuncion, furnished, all utilities provided, and I paid roughly $350 a month for it. I moved to Encarnacion and got a 3-bedroom unfurnished apartment. I pay $500 a month plus about $100 a month in utilities, all electricity. Our electricity here is about 5 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's pretty inexpensive. And one of the problems with Paraguay is you see a great dichotomy in the the standard of living of the poorest and of the middle class and upper middle class. Just wide divergence. There are some gorgeous houses here. Gorgeous houses in Asuncion, and they're owned by the wealthy. Paraguay has about 50 families historically that ran the country. Their grandchildren are now becoming adults and are changing a lot of the old thought of, should we as a family even control everything? And so we're seeing a lot of progress in that regard. Costs of things have gone up over the last 10, 15 years as people discovered Paraguay as an investment opportunity. So, clearly things are more expensive than they were 10 years ago. And, people will talk with an old expat who's been here for a while, and they'll talk about the good old days and how cheap things were. They certainly aren't that way anymore. Yeah.
Well, I sit here thinking about the good old days that were just 3 years ago. Here,
Yes.
everything changed, but yeah, that's how it goes. What do you do on what do you do for? How do you entertain yourself? What do you do on any typical day?
My main focus is to improve my health and my Spanish. And so I spend a lot of time studying Spanish. My goal is to become as fluent as I possibly can at 72. The old brain cells just don't work like they used to. Or maybe the two that are left are working overtime. I haven't figured that out yet. I also get out and walk every day for my health. And other than that, it's just enjoy life because it's a very tranquil life here. There's, you know, no serious crime. The crime rate is almost identical to the United States, and it has the same caveat you would have in the United States. There are neighborhoods you don't go to, or cities you don't go
Or
to.
cities. Yeah.
More cities. And so I'm not worried about crime at all in Encarnacion.
Nice.
Other than
So
that, yeah.
is the food the same? Beans and rice and empanadas and
Yes, it is, however, flavored fairly blandly. I have to add, something to everything I eat in order to make it reasonably tasteful.
yeah.
I don't know how it developed, but the Paraguayans do not care for anything remotely spicy.
Colombia used to be that way. It's going through a change in the last handful of years.
Yeah.
I used to not even be able to find any kind of hot sauce on the shelves. Now you've got 50 to choose from. So it's changed a lot here, but a lot of the traditional food here is that bland salt.
Yeah.
It's like only salt. And I avoid those places, but it's changed a lot. And so I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah. You see the same thing here. You can get bottles of hot sauce, but to me, that's just hot sauce. It's not necessarily real spice.
Right.
And so I'm looking, I'm always on the lookout for a source for new spice, or for actual spices, I should say. They do have some very, very traditional foods from this area. Southern Brazil, northern Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, western Bolivia, all were populated by the people called Guarani. And one of the unique, which is also, by the way, the name of their language. And the language Guarani is spoken by 90% of the people in Paraguay. So functionally, almost everybody in Paraguay is bilingual, speaking both Spanish and Guarani. So that's an unusual aspect. You walk down the street and there'll be a sign mixed of Guarani and Spanish in the sign, which makes reading the signs a little bit different. Fortunately, I'm studying a little Guarani too. But
no, that was a group that they're in the Amazon, correct?
I don't think they were. They're part of a larger group called Tupel is the language group, and all of the tribes in this area, including the Amazon, would be part of that larger group. The Guarani are a
subset,
language and cultural subset of that.
Yeah.
But in Paraguay, there's a great deal of respect for mothers, and because of a war that took place in 1875, roughly, called the War of the Triple Alliance, where Paraguay decided they wanted more, the dictator in charge at the time decided he wanted more territory. He took it upon himself to declare war on Bolivia, Argentina, and Brazil. And as you can imagine, they got themselves wiped, putting it politely, and about 60 to 70% of the military-aged men in Paraguay were killed. As a result, the women had to take over and run the country for almost 20, 30 years. And so there's a great deal of cultural respect for the women. But as part of that, because almost all of the women were native Guarani, even if they, say, had married a European, the women spoke Guarani to their children. So Guarani has been passed down to all of the people, and everybody is, their first language is Guarani at the crib, and then they learn Spanish in school and TV and things like that.
Interesting. I years ago, it was one of those old movies from the 40s, probably. There is a movie out there about that war. And it was pretty fascinating. As you were talking, I'm getting flashes of it because they talk about tactics, and there's a big lake there and a bridge, and kind of figuring out how to get across and not get wiped out. And it was a very interesting movie, and it talks about some of those things.
Well, the war had a major impact on the culture, and of course caused Paraguay to, with very good resolution, not get involved in armed conflicts. They have an active army for self-defense. They've got a navy. They've got, actually, for a landlocked country, one of the largest navies proportionate per population in the world. But that's because Paraguay is totally landlocked by rivers, and almost all of their border is a river of one sort or another.
Right.
And so they have naval vessels that patrol the rivers for smuggling and things of that nature. And
Cool.
That's the limit of their military.
Yeah, war was not a very good idea, as I recall.
Polite way of putting it.
So you moved there from the U.S. directly?
Yes.
Visa, how difficult was it to get it? Was it very expensive?
There are two kinds of visas: ordinary tourist visa, and that's no cost. You go in, stay 90 days, and then leave. There's a different sort of visa called it's still called a tourist visa, but it's a 10-year visa. I paid $160 for mine. I had to go to a consulate in Argentina to get it, but because you can't do it in country, it was just a day trip. And then I have to leave the country every 90 days, but it's relatively easy, and nobody's going to say a thing if I don't get my residence accomplished like I want. For people seeking residence, last October, they simplified the system. Used to be you had to have proof of income, medical check, things of that nature. Currently, you need to be able to show you don't have an arrest record. So for Americans like myself, it's an FBI background check, apostilled and notarized by the local authorities and translated. So it's a relatively simple process, except the long pole in that tent happens to be the Secretary of State. And so I'm waiting on the Secretary of State to get my updated FBI background check. When I arrived, I had one, but I was missing another document, the Social Security document, waiting to be apostilled. And so by the time they changed the law,
It expired.
FBI
Only
background
good
check
for
expired.
90 days or something like that.
6 months,
90.
but it's 6 months. But when
6 months.
the apostille process takes 2 to 3 months, you only have 3 months left.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, is there anything you want to add to your experience there? I mean, your overall feeling?
Very content. I did not think I would be this happy. Unfortunately, Americans who come here are at least upper middle class in relative terms, in Paraguayan terms. And so we can enjoy a lifestyle on a pensioner's retirement that's very, very comfortable. I rented a 3-bedroom apartment just because I liked the location. I could have gone for a 1-bedroom apartment and paid half.
Yeah.
So, very content.
Nice. Well, I thank you for coming on. Before I let him go, do we have any questions for him directly? It's like the chat got quiet here.
And free range is spot on. Rutherford Hayes, one of his few notable accomplishments was negotiating a ceasefire and a treaty between the
One of
Triple
his
Alliance
one of his
Paraguay.
two notable accomplishments. All right. Well, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to let you go. I thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience.
My pleasure.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Okay. I'm going to do some. Sure. I waited. Healthcare there privately. That's a good question. I didn't think of it. Wait, hold on a second. He might still be here. Let me ask him that. You're still here.
Foreigners can use the public healthcare system if they like. However, most foreigners will private pay for their healthcare. The public healthcare system is very slow, operates on Paraguayan time. And you could go in the morning and quite literally spend all day there. So it's not horrible healthcare. It's certainly not up to Colombian standards or Costa Rican standards. But for the things they treat frequently, dengue fever, things like that, they do all right.
Got something else here. Let me put it up on the screen. There's an agreement between Paraguay and Colombia that states all Paraguayan citizens are also Colombian citizens and vice versa upon request. Well, it's interesting.
I did not know that. There is there is a treaty between Paraguay, Argentina, Venezuela, Uruguay, and Brazil that a citizen of one of those countries can go to another country and without any additional paperwork, well, with minimal additional paperwork, establish residency there. Venezuela, since they've gone so cuckoos, has been temporarily suspended from that treaty.
Yeah. Just the keeping track just got out of hand. It was the same in Ecuador, where they had an open door policy, and at first, come on in, and just letting people come in. And as it became more and more of a disaster, they said, "Oh, well, wait a minute." They even shut the border for a while, and then they started tracking them. They couldn't just come in and disappear.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for your answer. That is the name of the treaty.
Yeah, there's different versions for different countries also. There's like Ecuador has under that same treaty, but they don't have all the same things that you just mentioned. But you can get oh God, I can't remember. You print it off on the internet, and it's permission to go in and stay there for a period of time without having to go through a visa process.
Yeah. Americans have it lucky. Brazil and Argentina both will give you a short-term visa with, just your passport. So we're fortunate in that regard. Things get a little more complicated for other folks on a expat group, Paraguayan expat group, and folks from Canada have a hard time because they're not a member of the Hague Convention, so they can't get an apostille. Those are complicators for some people.
Yeah, they have that with Colombia. They have problems in Ecuador. Yeah, it's an issue.
Yeah. All in all, Paraguay is very, very welcoming to immigrants.
Well, it does bring up something in Colombia. People ask me quite a bit that I'm eligible this year for the residency visa. Well, now that residency visa has been changed to permanent, from permanent to 5 years. They're still calling it permanent. And so I don't even know if there's an advantage to it anymore. But it's a step you take for citizenship. And the citizenship, on the face of it, doesn't have a whole lot of advantages. I mean, you go to some countries that you can't go to from the United States, but those are countries you probably wouldn't want to go to anyway for the most part. But this is one of those things where many of the countries in South America, you can travel freely through those countries. You don't even have to have a passport as long as you do the documentation. And so, one of the advantages that I tell people is don't buy, rent, because, you can live in a place for a year. And if you don't like it or you want to try something different, you can go over here for a year. Well, you could actually do the same thing with countries if you get that citizenship.
Yep.
Let me go live there for 6 months, see how it is. And so, it could be kind of interesting to do that.
I noticed that Nordic picked up on the fact that I'm drinking mate. It is a traditional tea in this general area, southern Brazil, northern Argentina.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yep. It's made with a local plant, ground up, slight caffeine, is asserted by the Paraguayans to have strong health benefits. I don't know medically if we could prove it, but I can give you an anecdotal evidence. I have COPD. At sea level in Houston, I could easily run myself out of breath. Or not run, but get myself out of breath by just walking rapidly. After a couple of months in Paraguay, I have had no trouble, and I walk frequently and no shortage of breath. So there may be something to it. And the Paraguayans, you'll see a style like this. Looks like a gourd. That's the bombilla. I'm sorry, that's the guampa. And then the straw here is a bombilla. Strains the tea so you don't eat tea leaves when you drink.
They sell that in Ecuador and Peru also.
Yes.
It's nothing I've really noticed here, but the one thing about Colombia is they're kind of some years removed from a lot of the traditional things that go back hundreds of years. Ecuador, you're kind of in the middle of it. Peru, you're in the middle of it. You're living it. And you sacrifice a lot of modern conveniences. Well, I happen to like a lot of modern conveniences. I prefer like a mixture, and I have noticed here there's some distance to tradition 300 years ago. Let's see. Have you been across the river to Posadas, Argentina?
Yes. Every 90 days, I'll have to visit Posadas until I get my temporary residency, just to renew the visa.
It's nice that you can do that.
Yeah.
Not every place works like that. Now, when you get the 10-year, is that something you just sign up for another 10?
Yes. For the residency process, you start with a temporary 2-year residency. You get a cedula, you can open bank accounts and the whole bit with a temporary residency. And then after the 2-year period is up, you can apply for a permanent residency, which lasts for 10 years, where your residency is 5. And then you renew that every 10 years. And that would alleviate having to go to Posada for me. Well,
it's twice as good as here. Of course, it was better because before you could it was permanent, like Ecuador, it's permanent. As long as I step across the border once every 5 years for the rest of my life, I hold my residency there. I'm getting close to it. I think the end of this year it comes up, but I haven't decided. If I go back, it's just to visit people. And so I don't know if I really care that I have it. Even though I spent thousands to get it. Okay, looks like we run the course of the questions, so I'll go back to my news topics. Once again, I thank you. I appreciate that you were still there. Ciao. Okay, let's see if we can get to some news things here. See if I can share the screen. Again, it's a little different. Got to work this a little differently. Boom, here we go. Let me get rid of that question. This is kind of on a sad note. You guys may not know him at all, but this is Bruce Munson. He was on this channel, I don't know, long time, before I moved to Colombia. And not long after I went from Manizales to Armenia, I think it was that first year that I was in Armenia, he came to visit and we hung out a little bit. Really, really nice guy, very low key, doesn't get rattled about anything. He just passed away. And it was very, very sad to hear about that. Mostly because I noticed something on Facebook, but kind of wish we'd talked a little bit more this last year. All right, so, oops, let me get to here. I want you to notice this. This is looking out of an Avianca airplane this week, and this is a Nevada mountain range, which is kind of circled. You got Armenia, one area, you got Ibagué, and you got Manizales, and it's in between those. And if you notice, there's a lot of snow there. A couple of years ago, these were almost bare, and you had all these people talking about, the climate, it's destroyed it, and it'll never come back. And that, well, this is more that's been there in decades. Things are cyclical. And I just want to point out that the snow and the glaciers are not gone forever, and they can return rather quickly. And this is a pretty good example. If you would have looked out that window a couple years ago, on the peak in the foremost and the one furthest back to the right, would have had a little bit on the very top, and that would have been it. You wouldn't have seen it anywhere else. So, good news. And here, this is Ecuador. Most of you probably know they had a 6.9 near Machala, actually, south of Guayaquil, but also fairly somewhat close to Cuenca. And all the photos, it looked like Cuenca was devastated. Actually, it's not really the case. They did have a person die and 2 people are injured. And it was because things fell. You see that car was crushed, and I'll show you. On the left side here is what this looked like before the earthquake. You see all that concrete artwork up on the top there. And on the right, all that's what broke away and crashed to the ground. The building's still there. There was a fair amount of cracks and damage on buildings, but nothing really that much destroyed. A lot of things flew off the shelves. I saw this one. It was kind of humorous, actually. It was a beer distribution place, warehouse, and it was mostly outdoors, covered, and they had stacks of these plastic crates full of beer bottles. And then there was another photo showing they just all had fallen over and dumped and crashed and all that wasted beer. But it's kind of the nature of anywhere, really. Okay. And here I'm always asking, Petro, what's in the news? Well, aside from the previous administration wanted to put a cable car in Salento because of the increase of tourism, and it would be a great place to have one, actually. Petro announced that he is in support of that, and so if it comes across, he won't try to veto it. But here's a case where his son is in trouble. Tons of money went his way along with some other people, and supposedly some of that money he funneled into his father's campaign. A lot of the money just kind of disappeared, and his stance on it is, well, he's his own man. I didn't raise him, so yeah, he's my son by blood, but we don't really have much going on together. And this being a family culture, there's a lot of people who are kind of annoyed with the response that he put out there. It's like, yeah, he's in trouble, and yeah, my campaign might have benefited, but I barely know his middle name. So I don't know. I think this guy would make some good Saturday Night Live skits. All right. So enough of that. Let me get out of that. And let's see. Renewing the resident permit has been very stressful. In 2 years' time, I'm going to apply for citizenship and not have to deal with renewing every 5 years. Yeah, I think that's another, with the new rules. See, here's the thing. I have to tell you, I'm kind of spoiled. I went through hell in Ecuador, but when I had to first get my visa, all the things that they're asking for here, I needed there, and a few other things. So it was more difficult. And what made it worse is they kept chasing me after things I didn't need. And so 6 months down the road and thousands of dollars thrown out the window, they ended up getting me my visa on what I'd entered the country with. So that was pretty frustrating. But just as far as the law goes, the requirements there, I didn't know it was a big deal because, it was my first South American visa, if you took away all the issues that I had. Well, here it was more than easy. I mean, show your passport, hand them a photo, pay the money, and hand over your income, and they took care of all the apostille and verifications. I mean, it was easy beyond belief. Well, now they've turned it into something more in line with other countries. You got to have the police or the FBI check, and it's got to be apostilled, just like he said he had to for Paraguay, like he needed for Ecuador. I mean, it's a typical thing around the world to do that. It's just, I'm kind of spoiled. So now I got to go do something that I wouldn't have had to do if they hadn't changed the laws. And excuse me. And so there's a number of things that, hoops that have to be jumped through. So, what do I do? Do I go for another 3 year? Do I go for the 5 year? Get the citizenship? I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I've got a few months before I have to make a decision. But, I have to keep it in perspective too. It's like, to myself, I'm complaining just like everybody else is complaining to themselves. But if you step back and look, it's like, well, you're not going to go anywhere else, or hardly anywhere else, where you don't have to do some of these same things, if not all or more. Okay. I believe you have to apply in person in Bogota for citizenship. I believe that's the case also, but I really haven't been looking into it. I heard that. Don't know if it's true or not. Okay. We'll get to, well, our time's getting there. This is very confusing, changing software, but let's see if we can get to some questions. It's Q&A time. It's time to start asking your questions. Remember, 4 question marks first, then ask the question. Okay. Let me know if we got anything. Also, if you're interested in other guests in other countries, I've got some friends that are in some different countries. I've got somebody in Argentina. I know somebody in Uruguay. He's the one that told me about goddamn snow. I thought I got away from it, kind of thing. And it depends. I mean, overall, I think the snowfall probably statistically doesn't show that much, but when they get it, they get it. And from what I understand, it runs in cycles. So you might have a few years where there's not much, and other years you can get hammered. I don't know. I thought about snow because I could hear him complaining. I don't know anybody in Bolivia, but I do know somebody in Brazil. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know. I have no idea if there's interest in it. I never asked them because, I'm mostly about Colombia. But anyway, any questions? Is anybody there? Did everybody tune out on me? Let's see. Well, I will say this. This week out of, let's see, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Out of 6 days, I was out running around on 5 of them. So that's pretty good. It's like, I'm free after being, in prison here for the last 4 months or so. My feet are mostly back to normal. They hurt a little bit, but they've shrunken to they almost look like they're supposed to. If I didn't know my feet, I wouldn't know any better. And so the danger of damaging them, I think is pretty much gone. And that was my biggest concern. Do you need an FBI report if you lived in Colombia for 4 years? No. If you're renewing your visa and you've lived here, great question. And I know for a fact, that you do not need it. So if you're here for the time period that they're requiring, and you've been in Colombia for that time period, you don't have to worry about it. How could I get my wife a U.S. citizen EPS medical insurance? A U.S. citizen, I'm not sure. How could I get my wife, a U.S. citizen, okay, EPS medical insurance? Okay. All she needs is a cedula. So get a cedula and sign her up. How many months income verification is necessary for the pension visa in Colombia? Is the FBI criminal background necessary? Yes. Can I just get one for my local state where I live? No. Well, you can, but you're going to want to get the FBI. Because they know. I mean, you could have been in another state. In your state, almost all states actually use the FBI. But other countries don't recognize it as such. So you got to get the FBI. How many months income verification? It's not a matter of how many months. You have to show that you have a steady source of income. Like this gentleman who was just on, he's got a pension from the military. Well, there's documentation that he has that pension. If you have Social Security, you can just print it off the internet and get it apostilled. But you have to have something along those lines. You can't just show, I got a bank account and I do a draw on the bank account. Here's 3 months to show it. That won't work as an example. Here we go. What's the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment on, let's say, Strata 3? Here in Armenia? 150 bucks. I myself Colombian. Okay. In Armenia. All right. Yeah, it'll be 100, 150 bucks. I actually, as I was driving through Armenia for the third time this week in the south, it occurred to me something that I've never done is to show some Stratus 2, 3, maybe 4 in the south, because while I blast the south, there are a couple spots in the south that are actually quite nice. Now, still a lot of things that you're going to want to go to are going to be in the north. But if there are things that you really wouldn't go to, but maybe a few times a month, then saving $100, $200 on cost of living maybe is not such a bad idea. And there's also that one area that's near all of those trees, actually pretty good sized forest in the south part of the city. It's considerably cooler there than the rest of the south of Armenia. It's not quite what the north is, where we maybe have 75 degrees, they might have 78, but it's pretty close. Juka, more guests, please. That was good stuff. Okay, I'll see what I can line up. Maybe we can do one a month or something. If you're renewing marriage visa, you don't have to have a police report. Yeah, you want to talk to your visa person for your specifics, because there's different kinds of visas, and the only one I really talk about generally is pension visas, because that's what most of my viewers are. Question mark. Blank. Can I get the insurance medical before I receive my pension visa in Colombia? Colombia with an O. Got to spell it right. You'll get harassed here. Colombians hate that. Can I get the insurance? No. The process is you get yourself 3 months of traveler's insurance, which, by the way, I just got notice that as of Wednesday until I think the 15th of April, it's that Hey Mondo insurance is 15% off. So if you go to the link that's below the where all the information is below the video on YouTube, you'll find a link to it, and you save 15%. But I just saw the headline. I'll have to read it for the details on it. But you get the traveler's insurance, and then while you're here, you're processing your visa, and then you're getting your cedula. Then you go sign up. Takes about a month to kick in. You go sign up for the EPS insurance, and then you've got it for the next time when you go to renew it. That's how that works. You didn't used to have that, but after COVID, they decided that anybody coming in should have their own medical. Before, they didn't care. Now they do. How does the apostille process work? Well, it depends on where you're from. If you're from the United States, you either go back to the United States and take it to a place that will apostille it. Typically, it's like $10. If you're overseas, like if you're living in Colombia and you don't want to fly back, there are places online. There's 100 places, but there's places online that'll do it for you, and it runs about $190, give or take. So you just send a digital file of the apostille, or of the document you want to apostille, and then they'll get it taken care of, and then they'll send it to you FedEx or whatever. They'll send it express to you, so you have a hard copy with the apostille, which you have to have. The apostille is actually a piece of paper that's attached to the document. How'd you get your driver's license without going to class? What if you don't speak Spanish? Well, I did it during COVID. And so they were letting me do it on WhatsApp. And I didn't have to go to class because they knew I'd been driving for 50 years. I showed them that information. And so on the WhatsApp, all I had to do was they called me every morning of the class, and I had to put the camera on me, video, and they put that screenshot of the camera into the computer system to show my attendance. And then when the class is over, they call back, same thing. So I didn't even have to go down. Well, now what they're doing is you have to actually physically go there, do your fingerprint, leave, and that's how they're doing it. So you don't actually have to sit through the Spanish class if you know how to drive. And when it came to the road test part, that's for the classroom, I think it's 25 hours. And then you got the road skills part. Instead of going through the 20 hours or whatever that was, they let me just put me in a car and said, here, drive. We'll see if you know how to drive. Well, it became very obvious that I know how to drive. I mean, if you're from the U.S., for the most part, you're going to be better than some of the best drivers here if you've driven for years. And so, it was a piece of cake. I got back and it was no problem, and they processed me. Bribe? No, there's no bribe. They just realized that sitting through the class won't do you any good, particularly since if you're from the U.S., they know that most people coming from the U.S. know how to drive. It's a different culture. In the U.S., you have to drive to live in most of the country, and they're aware of that here. Here, they don't grow up, sitting on their daddy's lap driving the car. Here, they actually need those classes. Let's see, what do we got? Dan, I lived in strata 4 to 6 neighborhoods in Medellin. When I moved to Ibagué, the barrio would be a strata 4 in Medellin, but a strata 3 here. Seems clear that smaller cities are more economical. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Medellin is expensive. Bogota is expensive. There are areas in Bogota that are less expensive, and Medellin tends to be just more expensive in general. No, but you take a place like Bucaramanga that doesn't have foreigners running through it, like Medellin and Bogota, and being the wealthiest city in Colombia, but its prices aren't a whole lot different than they are here in Armenia. But if you look at Ibagué, Pereira, Armenia, even Manizales, prices are all fairly similar. Now, I can look at Manizales and say, this is a little bit more, that's a little bit more, that's a little bit more. But overall, it's similar pricing. Where in Medellin, you look at that and it's about a third more than, what it is here. It's significantly more. There's a place that I've shown people that, come and visit me. I've shown a number of people when we walk around. There's a place near where I used to live, and it's near Mocawa. It's near Bolivar. It's near the La Lorena barrio. Nice area. Almost entirely Stratus 5 with some Stratus 6. But you go a block down, and there's an apartment condo building that's a little bit older construction, but it's a very nice place. And it's Stratus 4 surrounded by Stratus 5. And it's a really nice place. And you'll find little gems like that here and there. Now, there's not a massive difference between Stratus 4 and 5 as far as, utilities go, but there is some difference. But the rents, the higher the Stratus, the more they can get out of the rents. And so you can save yourself some money there. I would say that place is probably $75, $80 less than a place a block away that would be comparable, but it was Stratus 5. All adds up. But like I say, there's some places in the South that really not bad. And if your primary focus is save every penny you can, they might be places you'd want to consider. Just understand that, get a little warmer down there. Okay. We've run the hour. I think we're going to end it here. I don't know how many on this software. I can't tell. I have nowhere near the controls. I keep looking around. They're not there. But it works really well having a guest on. So I'm going to end it here. I want to thank you all. I don't know if I got contributions beyond the ones that I got before I started. If so, I want to thank you. I will acknowledge it next week when I'm back on my normal software. So with that, I will see you next week. Ciao.
Hello.